Hello guys, so in this video we are going to analyze part 3 questions in the IELTS speaking test. We'll discuss the main purpose of part 3 and what are the typical questions that they will ask you about. So the main difference between part 1 and part 3 questions is that part 1 is more into your personal life, personal questions about you, and then part 3 we move on to the big picture. It's going to be about community, people, society in general, and some abstract notions like friendship, love, happiness, things like that. So in this video, I will give you the best approach, or one of the best approaches that I use with my students when practicing for the IELTS speaking test. How to answer your questions fully in an efficient and effective way. I'll give you the most frequent questions or the most typical questions asked in part 3, and then I'll give you a sample answer where you can see step by step the strategy that I'm following so I could develop my answer properly. In that case, you'll complete your task achievement properly, successfully, at the same time as you are completing your lexical resource, your grammar range and accuracy by using nice expressions and vocabulary in your answers. We'll analyze it all together so you can apply it on the day of your exam. So remember that part 3 is more about explaining yourself. You need to support your ideas and your opinions. If you don't know what to say here, it doesn't matter. You need to attempt all questions and try to give an answer to all the questions. Otherwise, you will lose marks for it. Obviously, you could be honest with the examiner and say that really you don't have an answer for this because you haven't thought about this before, or actually you don't know anything about this topic, but you could guess. So you need to give a hypothetical answer to that question in particular. Obviously, some of these questions are quite complex. So if you need time to think about your answer, there is no problem. The examiner will understand that. So you just need to present it. You need to state it. And that's it. He will wait for your answer. So you could say things like, let me think about this, or give me 1 sec, I haven't thought about this before. Things like that. So in that case, you will follow a very natural approach towards the exam. The only thing is, remember, strike a balance between these kind of situations. You can't be all the time saying, I don't know about this answer, I haven't thought about this is a very interesting question. You should avoid this overuse of signposting. You need to use each signposting in the correct way for the correct question. So using signposting is one of the pillars for part 3 answers, but you need to know which one to use and when. Alright guys, so you know that in part 3 you will be asked a range of questions related to the topic that you have to talk about in part 2. So if the monologue is about traveling, then part 3 questions will be related to traveling. So you know by now the most frequent topics in the IELTS speaking tests. So for example, it would be like environment, education, traveling, food, family, places in general. They would ask you to compare 2 things, like for example, to compare one means of transport with another means of transport, to speak about the past and the present and the main differences. They would ask you questions about the future. They would give you like one statement and they will tell you if you agree or disagree with it. They would also ask you the main reasons why something is taking place or something is happening in our society. Because remember, these questions will talk about more abstract issues and ideas. So they would ask you about the world, countries in general, society in general, communities, people, right? So they are much deeper deeper issues and much deeper questions than in part 1. So in this case, that's why you have to give more details, more examples, and more reasons to support your answers. Just quick things here. So remember, if you don't understand something in any of these speaking test, okay, if you don't understand anything about one question in particular, or it's not clear to you, it is okay for you to ask the examiners to explain it, or to repeat the question, or to paraphrase it, so that you can actually answer properly. So that's fine, you can completely do that, but you have to just keep a balance of these things. You can't do it all the time, obviously. So let's go for my step-by-step strategy that I always tell my students to use, and it's quite effective. So it helps you complete part 3 answers in an efficient way, so that you never forget any of the points and you tick the box for task achievement. Okay, so I always tell my students to follow, or try to follow, this strategy. First, you need to answer the question directly. So you should always pay attention to the question that the examiner is asking you and straight away give an answer. Then is when you give some reasons and when you give some examples to support your answer. Okay, so you have plenty of time to develop your idea fully. And another thing is to offer a different point of view as well. So 2 sides of the same coin. If you're able to do that, maybe it's not in all the questions, but in some of the questions you could say that it depends on the situation, and you could give both sides of the same situation, both views, and that's great. So let's go for it. What I always tell my students is, in order for you to boost your score to Band 7 plus, you have these 2 pillars in your part 3 answers. You have to carry them out. So you always need to use a range of discourse markers and a variety of synonyms to paraphrase the question. So this is something that it may look simple when you do it in the speaking test, but if you don't take into consideration all these expressions and all these aspects in each answer for each question in part 3, then you would never be able to just get rid of Band 6. That's actually the minimum requisite to move your score to Band 7 plus. So use discourse markers, synonyms, and paraphrase the question. So let's go for the most typical part 3 questions. What kind of jobs do young people not want to do in your country? That they ask you about society, your country. Jobs is one of the most frequent topics as well. Let's have a look at the answer. So what am I doing here? Well, is signposting. To start with signposting, it's quite essential in part 3. You could also do it in part 1, but it's more into a part 3 style. Well, to my mind, I've got a discourse marker to introduce my opinion, so to introduce my answer to that question. This is something that depends on each person and not on an entire generation. So what am I doing here? As always, this is not a black and white situation, so we need to place our sides in the middle, and we will be speaking about both sides of the same situation. I will support my answer with an explanation. That's why I've got the signposting. I mean, okay, to introduce my explanation to that answer. I don't see there are some specific careers that youngsters don't want to carry out. Okay, so what am I doing here? I'm using synonyms to paraphrase the question. So instead of young people, I'm using youngsters, all right? And instead of do, a job, I'm saying carry out. Phrasal verbs, so remember to use variety of vocabulary to boost your band score. There's so much variety in nowadays professional life, so again professional life instead of jobs, that young adults can just opt for. Very nice phrasal verb as well as a synonym of choose, whatever they set their heart on. Very good idiom, to set their heart on, to do what they want in life, right? To choose what they want, to decide on the best thing for them, to set their heart on. For example, so now I'm giving an example. Some people will find that completing tertiary education, so tertiary education is university studies, very nice synonym as well, and becoming an engineer is the walk of life. So walk of life means profession, job, career, okay? So now I'm using a discourse marker to introduce the different view, the different perspective of the same situation. Whereas others rather be, so others prefer to be, okay? So rather is a very nice synonym of prefer. To be worker bees means to be employees, to be workers basically, and performing more manual jobs. Manual jobs, it means more simple jobs that require some manufacturing or some repetition, which they find gratifying anyway. So it's a very nice complex structure that we have the use of relative pronouns. So as I said, I need to answer directly the question by using signposting and discourse markers. I need to give examples and explanations, use complex structures. So remember that the meaning of complex in this case is not a synonym of difficult or something that has to be formal and sophisticated. One of them is the use of relative pronouns like which, who, these kind of things. The second type is the use of modal verbs, should, may, might. The third type would be to use passives, it is said, it is thought, it is believed. Another complex structure would be the use of INGs at the beginning of my sentence. So for example, speaking English is important for my professional life, for example. So in that case, you're using the action, the verb at the beginning with the ing form, and that's considered a complex structure. And finally, conditionals are complex structures too. So if that's a complex structure, that's a conditional type. Alright, and finally, as I said, use phrasal verbs, vocabulary, synonyms, contractions. All of that would help you boost your lexical resource and your grammar range. To do a job, to carry out a job, to perform a job. So always paraphrasing the question. So as I said, you should give natural answers, but remember the main two pillars of part 3 questions by using signposting at the beginning of your answers and discourse markers to follow the step-by-step strategy. So I always tell my students that when you give the examples, you use a discourse marker at the beginning of the sentence, and when you give an explanation, you give another connector to introduce your explanation and support your ideas. So in that case, you will always fully and efficiently develop your answers in part 3. Alright guys, so that's it. I really hope this has been useful to you, and please let me know. Do you have any more questions about part 3 strategies? Just let me know. See you soon. Bye.